All right.
All right.
All right.
Whenever you're ready, take it away.
Today I am super excited to
so
have.
not ready.
You are so ready. Here we go. Super excited to have Steve Valentine here today. Many of you know Steve, and Steve, you've been around like, I don't know.
2 decades.
It's not
I'm
your
old.
first rodeo. But there's a long history with the Valentine family and real estate. And I thought today we could really kind of dive into what you're doing that's so different and so unique. Obviously, we work together, and
Yep.
I so appreciate that. But it's just interesting when you bring a client to the table. It's such a different story. Usually there's something going on with regard to the family or how you acquired the property, and I thought it would just, there's lessons there to share and learn, and I'm glad you're here today.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm very excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit. I've heard some of your story, but the Valentine family, I mean, your dad was in real estate for many, many years.
Yeah, so I'll try to shorten it because Shay told me not to talk too much. So, no, so my mom and dad were in the business. They were a married team for years and years, like almost 40 years. And he went in, I think it was 91, they went to Realty Executives, and, you know, they started down that journey with the bigger brokerage, the 100%, you know, first original 100% brokerage. And in 99, I got my license. Went to work with my parents, and that was where I learned. And my dad had gone through all the 16, 18, 7, 8%. So it always makes me laugh when people cry about 3.5 or 4%, right? Because it could always be worse. So that was where I started. And my dad was always a genius in the real estate investing space, being creative. Like that's where I got it. I just honed it in. And then in 2015, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And we had gone our separate ways during the crash. And so he went into the investing space very heavy, like more than 1,000 homes during the foreclosure that he bought for investors. I went into the REO space and did foreclosures and did very well in that. My dad got sick. We were just starting to pivot again, right? REOs were starting to slow down. It was like, okay, so what's next?
Yeah.
And when I had to break my dad's business down, I was like, there's some things here that could be tweaked. But the biggest tweak was this. This is what drives everything now. My dad dies at 63 years old, and he doesn't own a single piece of real estate. Not a single piece.
Wow.
So with that came the, wait, what? All these things that you did for investors, all this money that you made for people, and why don't you have anything? And so it really sent me on a journey to figure out, like, okay, how do I break this chain, and why are most real estate agents so eager when they come across an opportunity, like let's just say a trashed house? Why are they so eager to find a buyer rather than to find money?
Say that again. Say it again. This is big.
When there is an opportunity presented,
And real estate agents usually see these opportunities
firsthand,
more than anybody else.
firsthand.
Yeah.
So why are we so eager to find a buyer rather than find money? And part of it, the big thing that I found was just lack of education, right? Lack of seeing opportunity for what it is rather than being so commission-sided. Agents look at it like, oh, if I can double in this, that's where their money is.
Right.
Rather than how can I start creating wealth? And so that journey started to lead to, you know, what most people see is like, oh, you know, flipping and making a ton of money. The reality is there's not a ton of money in it unless you're doing volume. And if you really start breaking down and understanding the math behind taxes and tax ramification and all those things, you're like, oh, wait, maybe there isn't as much money in this, but is there money in flipping the property into a long-term investment property? And that was the journey that I was determined to, like, I'm going to figure this out, and this is what it's going to look like. And so it's been one step at a time, and
One house at a time.
One house at a time.
6 years later.
6 years later, we own 70 single-family homes. That is worth roughly $45 million right now.
And these are your homes that you have rented out?
These are all owned personally.
Amazing. So outside of that, obviously you've built wealth for your family and a legacy, but I've seen you do that with so many of your clients. So how does that, tell me about that conversation. So, and you meet people in random ways, which is hilarious to me.
Totally, right?
They'll call me like, hey, so I met this guy at the gas station. I'll be like, okay.
Right. Well, my license plate says strategy on the back of it. So somebody's like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, how many minutes do you have?
Right.
So I can tell you. Let's talk about a mutual client that like will put this in perspective.
Okay.
No matter what the real estate market is doing, everybody wants to base it on sales, volume, gross commission. Like those are the things that are driving. I wanted to look at people and go, you know what? What if there was better guidance that is going to break a generational chain around money, around what we can have, how we build wealth, our net worth, things that people don't tend to talk about. So David and Taylor, okay, by the way, she's pregnant again.
Oh my gosh, so great.
David and Taylor, like the journey is Taylor came from Texas a couple of years, 3-4 years ago. Wendy's friend, she lived with us for a little while. She ended up meeting David. They got married. Awesome. We're playing dominoes one night. I'm like, you guys need to buy a house. And so like 48 hours, you guys were on the phone, got them qualified. This was back when like we could still do a VA loan in the 250 range. And so I just told them very upfront, I'm like, hey, when we buy this, do not nest in it. Because when I come back in 12 months, we're going to refinance out of VA and we're going to go buy something else. And we're going to start down this road. So now we fast forward. David and Taylor's net worth, the two houses that they own, one of them is rented, one they live in, their net worth has increased by $300,000 in the last 3 years. So what does that do when we look at their kids?
Yeah.
What does it do when I look down in the future and go, I was able to have an impact on their family, not because I sold them houses, but because I was able to guide them through the strategy of how do I keep it and get them over the fear of it. You see,
Absolutely.
See, a lot of agents, so a couple of years ago before COVID and we could all speak on stages, the one question I would always ask, 5,000 agents, how many people own investment property in here? Only about 5% on average would raise their hands. But when you reverse the question, you say, how many of you would sell an investment property to a client? 100% of people will absolutely do that. How do you sell something you know nothing about? How do you get somebody to overcome the fear of tenants not paying rent, repairs? You can only help them overcome that fear and build that wealth if you have done it yourself through your experiences.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I remember taking the call from David when I think you guys met for dinner or something, at that 12-month mark, and he's like, oh, Steve told me to call you. He's like, oh, we're going to buy another house. I don't know if we're going to buy another house. Talk me through it, And again, I think it is, people don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And, I think there is so much more that goes in on our side as well, as far as that strategy and helping position and liberate equity. And how do we do that? And what makes sense as we build wealth through real estate, And I think that there's just such a significant story to be told. And that's why I had you here today. So, I appreciate you and all you do. I love the fact that you have people out there that you've helped over the years, like David and Taylor, but you have so many of those stories.
Well, it translates into more than just that. So one of the ways we've been able to accomplish a lot of what we've done, you remember how I said we're so focused on finding the buyer rather than finding the money?
Yeah.
So where did I start this journey? And this is where I really want the agents to understand is that I received a Zillow lead right around the time my dad was sick. And it was in Moon Valley, and it was a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Grandma had passed, guy was in from North Carolina. So I walked into the house and I'm like, well, look, and this is where agents take on jobs we shouldn't. And the house needed to be cleaned out. He was out of state. And I'm like, look, if we do all this, paint, carpet, yada, yada, the house will be worth about $150. And we can help you with that, right? So that I can get my $3,500 listing commission. And we can do all this stuff. And so I remember walking out the door and I swallowed really hard. I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, the guy says no. Worst case scenario, I lose the listing. Worst case scenario, I lose $3,500. Okay, that's the worst case scenario. So as I'm walking out the door, I didn't even have the ability to look him in the eye when I asked the question, because that's how scared I was. I'm like, what if I give you $100,000 for the house right now? And he's like, give me 102. I'm like, oh, he just said yes. I don't have any money. What? Wait, he said yes. I'm like, okay. So I scramble and I get the contract and we sign it right there on the hood of my car for 102 grand. He's like, when can we close? And I'm like, in like 10 days. So we signed the contract. He left.
And you don't have the money.
I don't have money.
Oh my gosh.
So I quickly learned to say yes and figure it out later. So then I'm having coffee, which I do every week with one of my mentors, my older mentor, and we're going through things. And I'm like, hey, I bought this house and I need $110,000. Will you loan me $110,000? I don't have any money. And that's like exactly like a little kid asking for something that they don't know if they can have. Yeah. And he said yes. I'm like, wow, 2 yeses. I'm like, this is really easy.
Yes,
and so he loaned me the $110,000.
Wow.
Now I want you to see where that translates. I would have made $3,500 one time. Okay, that's it. Helped him out. That's great. $3,500. That house right now, I'll keep it light. The house right now pays me about $7,500 a year in cash flow. It's been rented to the same tenant, since the second year I owned it. So we've owned it for 7 years now. Here's the insane part. The house has tripled in value.
Easily.
So not only did we triple in value, but remember I bought it with 110 in hard money, basically. I refinanced it 12 months later and it appraised for that, 80% loan to value. So I didn't have any money into that house at all. I still don't have any money into that house. It's still an infinite return on money. So now we've unlocked the equity and we refinanced it. We pulled more money out. Yeah. It's still cash flows. And now we bought other houses with it. And so we've continued to do that over and over again. And what's crazy about it was I just learned by the Braille method. I'm like, well, I wonder if this will work. Well, how about this? And so now it's just translated in something that I really love is I have really built my foundation for my house, for my own house. And now I can go and do that for others. Now that I've done all this experience, I'm doing it for my clients. I'm doing it for real estate agents because I believe our industry is very undereducated. Mm-hmm. And so what happens with undereducation? How many people do you think in 2018-19, if they would have had a conversation with me versus an online buyer, and somebody would have told them, hey, you know what, I really think you should keep your house. You realize that a lot of those people could have like $100,000, $200,000 worth of net worth increase had they just had somebody to walk them through what it looked like.
Yeah. Especially over the last 8 years.
Especially.
So, to be the devil's advocate, what happens if the market turns? Then what?
Then what?
Then what?
Then what?
Because people are fearful though.
Yeah.
So,
so what happens? Well, here's a story that goes with it. Go back to my very first house that I sold. I bought it in 1999, 7.75% interest rate. That was back when things were $100,000 though. And my dad was always like, oh, you need to keep it. Of course, at age 23, the house doubled. $200,000. I had rented it for like a year. It was 2003, 2004. I made $93,000. I probably got taxed on it because I had kept it as a rental, so that sucked. I don't know where that $93,000 ever went. I'm sure it paid IRS or something. Right. It was a big chunk. That house was $107 when I bought it. It was $200,000 2004. It was back down to like $100,000 in 2009.
Okay.
Today it's worth $375, and it would have been 30 years paid off. Even if I kept, here's the kicker, even if I kept the original mortgage at 7.75%, it still would have cash flowed. And today it would have cash flowed $1,000 a month, but it would have been 24 years paid off. Yeah. That's it. Like, I understand people are fearful of repairs and all those other things. Guess what? It's just now 25 years old. I would have replaced one AC unit in the life of owning it. Mm-hmm. It was a newer house. People are fearful of what are tenants going to do. I can tell you right now, I've had one tenant actually do more than $2,000 worth of damage
Wow. And you own 70.
I own 70, and we manage
Rental
350 for investors.
Wow.
And during COVID, we had 1% of all properties managed not keep up on the rent.
I remember having the conversation when COVID hit, you and I, and obviously your exposure with, now the country's in a pandemic, and are people going to pay their rent? And, I think at the end of the day, people need a place to rest their heads, to raise their families.
They do.
And if they're not in a position to buy a home, they're renting homes. And that's where they're going to pay their payments.
Here's the other thing.
Car payments are probably going to go first.
Oh, well, let's talk about cars. You talked about the market going down. We will buy a brand new car, and it will go down in value by 10%, and we will keep making the payments. Right? It'll continue to be less money, worth less. We continue to make the payments. We don't freak out and sell it.
Such a mindset, though.
Why isn't it the same thing with real estate?
It's media, though. I mean, really,
Sure.
too. Right? It's media, which sometimes exacerbates the fear that exacerbates the problem that's at hand. Right?
So here's the other thing that I've really learned and honed in on over the last couple of years is some people think about, being a landlord. Actually, the reality is when you are a landlord, the impact you get to make on not only other families, but your own clients when they're in situations. Now, what some people don't know is that, back in 2007, we lost everything, like down to nothing. Foreclosed on, 2 toddlers, no money, $1 million worth of debt. And we ran through that over a 4-year period of time, paid everybody off, we bought another house. But the landlord that we rented from took a chance on us. Like, please just give us an opportunity. That had a substantial impact on where we called home for that 5 years with my kids. I never thought of it as a rental. It was our home. I was just paying somebody different than the bank. And so many people think like, oh, well, tenants don't take care of things. And it's so far from the truth. And so we've had some of the most amazing stories from the people that we've impacted because we gave them a home to live in.
Yeah.
Right? I know. So owning the real estate also allows you to impact other people. And, the letters that we get, we just got a recent letter from a family out in Goodyear that they're like, look, we're veterans. Nobody really taught us about money. We screwed up our credit. We're trying to get closer to family. This would be the ideal rental. I know our credit isn't the greatest. Will you please give us the opportunity to make memories in this home? Yeah, I don't even need to look at your application, because that was my letter 10 years ago.
Wow.
So full circle, making the impact on those people. I'll try not to make you cry with this one. And I share these stories because there's so much depth in them. My 18-year-old son, Christian, in 6th grade, came home, told us about some kids in his class, said, hey, there's something going on at home. And then he came home and found out more information that mom was being booted out of the house that ex-husband's family owned. Obviously, Christian knows what we do because we openly talk about it. And he's like, can you guys help him? Like, you do real estate. Like, what does it look like? So we happen to have a house that we were just finishing up remodeling. Single mom, 4 kids. That's where we put her, right? We were able to work some stuff out. We put her in there. But Christian just got a text message, 18 years old, the kids that they helped. The kid sent him a text message. He says, hey, I just want you to know that our lives were changed because you listened to me in 6th grade. Like, my mom, they still live in the house.
Oh my gosh.
They're still there. Has nothing to do with the money.
Right.
The money is just an afterthought, right?
What you do is you listen to the story, though. You're so masterful at that, and you taught your son to do that.
Yes.
Wow.
So
there's a lesson there.
The impact that the kids have had as well. Even now they're both working at Dutch Brothers. Christian, again, he's like, hey, single mom that works with us, 2 kids, needs a rental property. We have one. We'll figure that out. So you see where you start getting to have an impact, and it's not about. I have a I own places of opportunity for people to put their head in and raise a family.
Yes.
And hopefully that impact is something that changes their life like it did mine when somebody gave me an opportunity to rent.
So where do we go from here? Is it a good time to buy real estate?
It's always a good time to buy real estate. So the difference is, well, yes, it's a great time to buy real estate. 2 reasons. 1, interest rates are still really low. 2, especially in Phoenix, the demand for housing is so crazy and the rental market has gone up so much. You can still buy, like running the numbers right now, you can still buy a $450,000 rental property with 20% down and it still cash flows even if it's a couple $100 a month.
Right.
There's still opportunity there.
Yeah.
There's still an opportunity to keep your $450,000 house, pull some equity out of it, and go buy something else.
Yeah.
And that's probably the one thing that needs to be taught more, is for people to understand, like, keep the house, but if you're keeping the house, do you know if it's going to make a good rental?
Right.
Right? Like,
because not all houses will, right?
No.
So paint the picture. What does that box look like?
Paint the picture. I'll tell you my buy box. It's what I teach. It's what I coach. The buy box looks like single AC unit, so something that's typically under 2,000 square feet.
Okay.
3 bedroom, 2 bath. Doesn't matter if it's garage or carport. I'm not a big fan in HOAs, but if it has a small one, fine, it's no big deal. And no pools.
Okay.
I don't like the liabilities of pools, and I don't like the expense. A pool will actually cost you about, well, in this day and age, probably about $90,000 to maintain over the life of owning it. So you get rid of the pool, and it's just another problem. So what we're trying to do in that buy box is reduce the long-term liabilities. If I only have 1 AC unit and 1 house versus 1 house and 2 AC units, right, the liability. So those are kind of my ideal rental property, and that's pretty much anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like that same footprint. So if it's bigger, you might keep it a couple of years, just depends on what it looks like. So that's what my buy box looks like. You know, and typically right now it's under 500,000.
I know that you're sharing this message with the real estate community, and you're doing a mentorship program.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I did a very clunky, throw it out on my stories, hey, I'm going to show up on this call every Tuesday, and I want you to be able to pick my brain, because you know what calls and text messages that I get, hey, can I buy you lunch? Can I pick your brain? I'm like, number one, I don't have the time, not that I don't want to, but I also have a lot of knowledge that people are paying me for right now and they're investing in. So I just decided to throw it out there. And so we've got 10, 11 people right now. They show up on the call, and the goal was to give people the platform to say, I don't know how to do this. I have a client that wants to do this. How do I structure it? I found an opportunity. I'm not prepared for it. Can you buy it? Right? I've really become a problem solver in the industry.
Yeah.
And that's what I like. So I was like, well, if I can help other people be problem solvers, that just helps the industry at the end of the day.
Is it the same 10 or 11 people? Is it a coaching program? Is there a cost?
It's not a coaching program, so it's $1,000 a month, and it's month to month, right? If you come in, you don't like it, they get access during that window of time, right? That is the mentorship. The point is that everybody has different stories and scenarios, and I'm a scenario-driven person, right? I've seen you, like, you're really good at talking into a camera and getting a video. That is not me. Like, I can't just directly talk to the camera and go, well, this is how this goes. You have to ask me questions so that and give me a real live scenario so I can fix the problem. Because if there's not a problem to fix, I can't do it. It's the same way. It's the reason I got out of the automotive field.
Yeah.
You'd have these kids that were awesome in the book, and I'm like, the kid doesn't know what a wrench is, but he could fix a car on paper, but he couldn't fix a car in the shop.
Yeah.
So I can't fix a house on paper. You
Yeah.
have to give me the scenario to fix it.
Yeah. So I often hear people say, I don't have the money to buy real estate. And then I've heard
Can I swear on this video?
No, you cannot swear. But then I've heard you say what you're going to say. But say it, because I think it's important.
It's crap. It's a mindset. It's really a scarcity mindset. And there's money out there. There's ways to partner with people. There are all kinds of strategies to get where you want to go. And I used to think, we all remember the $39.99 books you would buy from infomercials,
Yes.
right? that you could buy things with no and low money down. You're like, what does that look like? Oh, it exists. You just have to know it, right? You have to understand how the numbers work, and you have to understand the conversation. And look, solving problems for people is sometimes looking at how do I help them to where it will help me. So I'll give you a quick example. Oftentimes I get calls from family members where parents need to move. My first question is like, is the house owned free and clear? What are they going to do with this chunk of money? How are we going to get this chunk of money to last longer to pay for care? Okay, those are all the things I want to know. If they're set, right, the house is no big deal, they don't need the investment, great. But recently I had a client that I sold the house to 20 years ago. Mom needs to go in a home now. Yeah. And I asked them, like, okay, you're going to get this. It's only going to last this long. Like, that's it. If I buy the house from you, we can increase this by double. So I gave them a way to create income and sell the house and get rid of the liability, but create income. So I bought that house with no money down. But I also created an income to take care of mom that doesn't put a burden on the family.
Amazing. So thinking outside the box, you do it so well. I mean, that's really what he is all about. Thinking outside the box. And now you have a new podcast.
Yep.
Thinking OTB.
Thinking OTB. It's actually, we just hit our 1-year anniversary. I haven't talked enough about it. Bernadette Espinoza from Lawyer's Title, she's my co-host. Which she totally got suckered into doing that. Didn't know she was going to. Yeah. But it has been a lot of fun. And early on, like the first 6 episodes, I didn't really know who we were talking to. And then we just decided, like, look, real estate agents are my audience.
Yes.
Right? Not the consumer.
Yeah.
Because the stuff I do gets complicated. The consumer's like, I'm out. Right? So I was like, okay, I want to educate the agents and really make this about them. So we've had some great guests on. And we've been doing it for a year now, so it's on Stitcher and Apple and all that stuff. And I really just do that as a free place to like really give good content to listen to the conversations. We had some clients on this morning. They are clients. He's an investor. They're going through a strategy session right now, and he's also buying investment properties from me, and they're lending me money all at the same time. You're like, there's a lot there, right? Their story was very interesting, though. So they reached out to me, and we have very similar stories with our fathers. So I met Keisha through my mastermind, his wife, and they called. They're like, hey, we're coming into town, and we need to meet with you because Cena's dad's passed, and we don't know what to do. They inherited about $4 million worth of real estate and no direction.
Yeah.
So they sat down, they're like, we want to figure out what to do with this. Now, it's not even in my market. I don't need it to be in my market.
Right.
I wanted to give them the strategy and the thought process to think through, like, here's what we can do. And by the way, your dad left you with this legacy, and you need to figure out the opportunity to make sure that you carry his legacy forward, because that's why he left it to you.
Right.
This is not winning the lottery. This is not buying Lamborghinis. This is how do we increase the wealth, the stewardship of what we inherited to make it move forward for his grandkids that aren't here yet.
Yeah. I love it. So tune in to Thinking OTB podcast.
Yep.
And thank you so much for coming by today. I appreciate it. I appreciate all you do. And honestly, when there's something, I've had real estate agents that I've said, like, call Steve. Sometimes stuff happens in the process that maybe somebody was going down a path. I know we've had this and, lost their job or whatever, and we still had to figure out something to do.
Remember the truck driver?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
So I had the real estate agent call you. Y'all figured it out, and then we came back and were able to...
I bought it. I sold it back to him. We had to do some fixes for it, but we fixed the problem.
We refinanced him in like 6 months after.
That's what I do want people to understand is, like, what I do is working with the agent community to solve problems.
They're not your competition.
I'm not your competition whatsoever. I'm not
at all.
here to pilfer clients or any of that stuff. I'm here to help solve the problem, which ultimately, guess what? You become the hero because you know where to go when something gets crazy and you need a crazy solution to fix it. to make everybody win. And that's the goal, right?
And that's what you do so well.
And I've
It's your
taught
gift.
I've taught my team. I'm like, our goal is to never say no to anybody.
Yeah.
There might be a price tag for the yes, but I never have to say no. I will figure it out and I will fix it. You just need to give me all the variables and we can fix it.
I love
And then you can choose on the price tag.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Follow Steve in social, and if you have something going on, he's your guy.
I'm your guy.